Welcome to the 2-Month Review, the weekly podcast from Open Letter and 3%, in which we take a large book, difficult book, break it down into sections, come here, talk about it, have some fun. I'm joined as always by Brian Wood, who is in sunny San Diego.
Hi, Chad. So good to see you and hear you. It's been too long, it seems like.
I think it actually has. It's been a while, and
Yeah.
There's a few too longs that are in there. First up, just to mention, we will be covering Radiant Terminus by Antoine Volodine this season. This is our first episode in which we're just going to be doing the introduction of like who he is, talk a little bit about some of the things that he's written about, his style and his sort of project, because this whole thing is a big project, which will make this interesting. And then we'll be back on Wednesday. Brian, you're going to miss it, but because you're going to be in the air. But
Yes.
Anthony Blake from Open Letter and Haley Dezart, who used to intern here and lives in Chicago working for a publicist, book publicist now, we're going to talk on Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube about the first 3 chapters. And that will be available as a podcast on Thursday. So you're getting doubled up this week. 2 episodes.
Whoa.
Yeah. A lot of podcasting. And the reason why, someone kindly mentioned on the post about the schedule, the reading schedule for this season, they wondered where the podcast was, because there's supposed to be one that went up last week. And the reason there isn't one from last week is that I was in Albuquerque with Anthony and a lot of booksellers for the Winter Institute, the ABA Winter Institute. And I lost my bag with my computer in it.
Oh God, I'm not laughing, but I'm laughing. Oh my God,
it's pretty funny. It was at
Oh,
the Shelf Awareness reception. We left that reception, and I either left my bag there or it was gone before that moment. There's evidence that seems to indicate that it was gone before I left. However, no one started my computer and no one's stolen my identity yet, but they have my computer and my passport. So theoretically, they could do a crime and frame me.
See, if there had been a wall around your computer, it still would have been there.
God, if only. I asked for funding for a wall from the U of R. It's like, I need funding for a wall. Someone's coming at my computer. Just can't trust booksellers.
People just take it. Yeah.
Those booksellers aren't from New York.
Especially.
They're not even.
Gosh, that's terrible, man. Sorry about that.
I'm pretty sure that someone just has it somewhere and like doesn't realize yet that it's not theirs. And I'll get a FedEx box with it in there in like a month.
Of course.
But until then, I'm making do. So that's why I'm in a weird situation this time, because this isn't my office, because I have no way of podcasting from my office.
Well, I'm sorry to hear about that, but yeah, geez, man.
It's the sort of shit that happens to me. So it's
yeah.
fine. It's fine. Anyways, let's talk about Volodine. So do you know anything about Antoine Volodine?
I know absolutely nothing, as always.
That's awesome.
As always. You slap down some like just random book that, unless you're like really into like the translating scene, now you're gonna know about or whatever. And I'm ignorant again. Thank you. Love it.
Although, yeah.
Please explain to me, what is this? I'd like to know.
So Volodine is the author at the moment. Antoine Volodine is a pseudonym for a French writer who writes under a series of different pseudonyms. The main ones are Antoine Volodine, who has the most books, Manuela Draeger, who has a lot of books, including a number of like short books for kids, and Lutz Bassman, and then Eli Kronauer. Lenai Kronauer has not had any of those books haven't been translated yet. But of Volodine, there's a number of his books that have been translated, starting with Naming the Jungle, which was translated and published by New Press back in like 99. And then Minor Angels, which University of Nebraska Press did, Post-Exoticism and 10 Lessons, which we published. And then Bardo or Not Bardo, which we published and which won the Albertine Prize for the best translated work of French fiction for the year that it came out. And then we did Radiant Terminus, which is the big sci-fi one that we'll be reading for this season. In the middle, there's one other Volodine book, Writers, that Delke did. And I can explain. I'm going to have a post that goes through most of these books, but I'll talk about all of them in a second. And then Lutz Bassman has one book out called We Monks and Soldiers, although we are going to be doing another of his books in a couple of years. And Manuela Draeger has one book out from Dorothy called In the Time of the Blue Ball. That's 3 little tiny stories that are all about, oh shoot, I forgot his name already. A character that recurs in a lot of her stories. Now,
but they're all the same person.
They're all the same person. So it's always heteronyms, very similar to like Pessoa writing as heteronyms. But rather than like with Pessoa's, where we don't have extant examples of most of his other heteronyms in English, in this case we do. and they do fit together. So supposedly, I'd heard that he's wanted to write a 49-book cycle world in which all these books sort of interrelate to one another. And so far, he's written 42 of those books. I believe Radiant Terminus was the 42nd.
That's madness.
There's one listed that's coming out in next year that would be the 43rd, I believe.
Do we have any idea of how?
It might be the 44th, though. I'm not entirely sure.
How old or how long this author with these headings have been writing for? Like what they're.
He was born in 1950, and the first book came out in 1985.
Okay.
So that's not super long.
Yeah. I like this, just to bring up real quick on the foreword by Brian Evenson, the second paragraph. He says, I use heteronym instead of pseudonym when speaking about Volodine, right? Because Draeger, Volodine, Bossman, Kronauer, et al. Function as much more than pseudonyms. As with Fernando Pessoa's heteronyms, they each take on a life of their own, with distinct interests, concerns, and they make up a collective of authors for post-exotic literature or whatever.
And so
So along that line, how is Volodine's heteronym personality different from the others? What is the life of the author Volodine?
So Volodine is the main one and was the main speaker for a long time for the post-exotic movement. This is this is where this is going to get complicated, and we'll be hashing this out week after week after week. So I'm just going to go.
What's with the quotes for post-exotic, by the way? Because I'm not familiar with post-exotic literature.
Because it's not a thing. He invented it. And a couple of there's on the post that will go along with this, and in an additional post, I'll have links to the new inquiry. Ugh, I can't read. Ran 2 essays by him called "Post-Exotic Novels, Novels, and Novelists," Part 1 and Part 2, in which he sort of explains what this is, but in a very Volodine way. But
my gut reaction is it a play, or is it speaking to the tropes of post-apocalyptic?
At times. So the post-exotic, the best way that I can describe it, and people who are more immersed in it, 'cause I've read all of the books that are in English, but that's a fraction of like his whole world, and they do have differences between them. So like Bardo Not Bardo is like stories that are frequently very funny about people trying to make it through the Tibetan afterlife, and and relates to that. Whereas post-exoticism and 10 Lessons tells a lot of like the specific terms that are used by post-exotic writers, and kind of accounts for their fall and their destruction. Because the world in which this exists, post-exoticism was a literary movement that was to upend everything, essentially to upend like the government, the capitalism, like anything that's like a power structure like that. It was supposed to just subvert it. But all of the post-exotic authors were jailed and died and are gone, more or less. But that's
why you like this so much. Burn everything down, and then everybody that does it is dead. Or in jail.
They're in jail.
That's right up my alley.
and then in this like sort of post-apocalyptic future of which he sometimes writes, there's generally giant spiders, which clearly I love, like way into giant spiders. But the books are very different in that way. So they sort of interlock because there'll be different characters that occur. And sometimes like post-exoticism and 10 Lessons kind of gives you the framework for what that movement is, of which and Radiant Terminus is sort of an example of it. So there's certain books that come up as examples and other ones that are more explanatory. And like the Manuela Draeger ones, she exists in the post-exotic world of Antoine Volodine as a character who tells stories to kids that are in like a concentration camp sort of setting, like a post-apocalyptic, tire fire, shit in the garbage can sort of place. So her books are supposed to be the stories that are being told to those children. That's
called Gary, and you just described Gary, Indiana.
I did.
You can just call it Gary if you want. Hi, Gary, Indiana. Nice to see you guys.
Manuela Draeger's books are set in Gary.
Stop selling guns to Chicago, please. Thanks.
They have enough. Poor Gary. But yeah, so that's sort of the setup for and the difference is like the Lutz Bassman book that exists right now is a collection of 7 stories. It's stories, and it reads like a story collection that sort of refers to post-exoticism, but as more of an example of it. So they do have like that kind of difference where Volodine speaks. And in this essay that I'll link to, he talks about like how Volodine was the speaker for the post-exoticist movement for a long time, but they're not writers in the traditional sense. They're a collaborative, so they use the word "we" from then on. in the more historical, before we get into that, because there's some things in here that I can say about that I think will really interest you. But before that, with Volodine himself, no one knew that he was using these pseudonyms these heteronyms exactly, until one of the Manuela Drager books that we're doing, 11 Studi Dreams, that came out the same year that Writers came out, and that it was a Basson book came out. They all came out in the same year, and that was when apparently the gig was up, and like he explained that he was all three of those people.
Okay.
But that also is not his name. I don't know what his name is.
They all write in French as well?
They all write in French, although I believe the actual author teaches Slavic languages somewhere in France, but he's a French writer that's interested in. So there's a lot of you'll see a lot of Slavic influences.
Does that make sense again? Then why this is so Soviet heavy and okay.
Yep, exactly. So
the other question I had for you too then is, so you have your entire volume of, I mean, how many books have you guys done? 200 now or something like that?
110.
All right. Well, I was being generous.
Yeah. Usually, that's a good trick. It's good.
What's a couple hundred books amongst friends? Come on.
Yeah.
So, all right. So you have your entire catalog. Why did you pick this? Aside from being too big, and so we can do it over 2 months, and burdening me with a ton of reading. Why did you pick this book specifically?
First, because I thought it tied into the Pessoa, and I think it ties into
what
they're planning on next. That there's a sort
Absolutely.
there's a good sequencing of those 3 books. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But then also because this book is really, of the ones that have been published in English, one of the most narrative driven, in a sense that it's not. There are a lot of these post-exotic elements to it. There's weird punctuation at times. There's all these things that can happen that are unreal. And Brian Evenson mentions this in his introduction, where it seems like the world is real, but I'll just read it because his words are better than mine. But he says, Volodine's worlds are vertiginous and strange, sometimes absurd, sometimes funny, often disturbing, but nothing is arbitrary in them. And this, for me, is what makes Volodine's work so much more resonant than that of many absurd or surreal writers. Even if the situation is absurd, you get the sense that Volodine is playing for keeps, that the philosophical and political investigations he is engaged in are real, and that he cares deeply about the people who populate his fictions. And that's very evident in this particular book of his. So I think that this is a really good starting point for anyone who wants to get into Volodine. Going in with post-exoticism is great because you get a frame, but it's also kind of it's a very technical and complicated book in which you're sort of dropped into the world. Whereas with Radiant Terminus, this builds in a way that's very logical, I think, and an easier way to enter into the Volodino-verse, I guess.
Yeah.
The
Well, it's interesting
post-exotic
because
verse.
when you talk about with sci-fi and fantasy for in particular, and as far as the craft of writing, there's a big emphasis put on world building. That's one of the hallmarks of a successful or unsuccessful speculative fiction, sci-fi, that kind of stuff. And the world building in this is insanely good, right out the gate. For something being literary and that as well. Usually you kind of drop the world building a little bit in a literary work, whereas this, it's still just, it feels so lived in, and like Brian was saying in the introduction, you can taste, touch, see, feel everything. It's incredible. Really incredible.
And I also really and I like the fact that it's a sci-fi. This is the most sci-fi of his books. It also did win what is the title of it? The Prix Medici. I'm mispronouncing it. French. They won a French prize. Won a big French prize when it came out. So it's also been lauded there. And it's a book that I really want to reread, and which is why you're choosing it too. But one thing that's funny about it, so one of the Volodine isms is that he's said before that he doesn't believe that his books, the words on the page or the things that are described, aren't what's important. What's important is the dreams that you have as you're reading that book is where the real meaning lies. And I was editing this book when I was in Minneapolis for a sales conference, and I read the first 100 pages of it in this one day when I first got there. I was editing, going through everything, blah, blah. And in the middle of the night, I woke up, had no fucking idea where I was, freaked out, called Kaya at home and was like, "Where are you?" And she's like, "At home." "Where you're?" And I was like, "Where am I?" And she's like, "In Minneapolis." I was like, "There's something happened. He got in there and wrecked stuff." And other people have told me they've had weird dreams too. So I'm hoping that this podcast becomes a chronicle of all the insane shit that I dream because of I dream of weird stuff to begin with. But Volodine can really wreck it. So that'll be fun. I want a lot of people out there having mass delusions of weird dreams everywhere. That's what
So
we're
I'm
doing.
only 70. I just did that first section. I'm only
You did the
77
section.
in, but
I
I've
haven't
not had
started it
any.
yet.
Okay, I haven't had any weird dreams yet, but
You will.
yeah,
It's gonna happen.
I'm excited to talk. Oh, I won't talk about it yet since it's just the introduction, but it's very good right out the gate. So.
It's pretty wild. So
Yeah,
I want to
very well written, and the translation I imagine would be very difficult to do, and it seems like this Mr. Zuckerman's doing a fantastic job translating it as well. Yeah.
He's very good, and he's very close. So there's 2 people who have translated the majority of his books, maybe 3. But J.T. Mahaney, who came through the U of R's program and did post-exoticism and Bardo for us, and is doing 11 City Dreams, the Draga book for us. He's one of the main translators, and then Jeffrey's the other. And then Jordan Stump, who's at the University of Nebraska and translates a lot of French stuff and has for years. He's done most of the other ones, but there have been like a couple other translators along the way. But they're the primary ones. And Brian, actually take that back. Brian Evenson translated the Drager book for Dorothy Press.
Are we going to have him on this
Hopefully.
season? Hopefully. Okay.
Hopefully.
Because I, without knowing that he was really into Volodine, I noticed there's a lot of parallels between his work and Volodine's that I thought were striking and really beautiful. So I'd really like to talk to him about it.
What kind of parallels do you have in mind?
Well, it was weird. I was actually talking with an editor last week, and I brought up he knew Brian, and I had mentioned how I really enjoyed his work. But we talked about like there's some folks that like when they push into that uncomfortable territory, they like double down and they go all in.
Right.
And I feel like Brian Evenson is that way. He's like an all in kind of like somebody, for instance, like George Saunders doesn't go all the way in because he's trying to leave some room for sentimentality and heart and maybe some playfulness.
Yeah.
And like there's no playfulness. It's like, nope, I'm going all the way to the edge. I'm taking you with me. And the first part of Volodine, like it feels like this is definitely one of those and similar to way something like like Cormac McCarthy's The Road or something, where it's like, nope, we're going all the way. I'm taking you all the way there, and like it or not, we're doing it.
Yeah.
And I feel like they're on that kind of end of the spectrum,
right?
Where they're not trying to be satirical necessarily, or because you could easily be very satirical with this, with nuclear meltdowns and famine and disease, and you could make fun like disturbing but funny things out of it. And it's like, no, I'm not going to give you that. Nope.
There are some funny moments, but
sure. It reminded me a lot too of like somebody like I can never say his last name. It's like super Polish, but the Painted Bird, Jersey.
Kaczynski, isn't it Kaczynski or?
No, but that's like every Polish name.
Right, yeah, I know. Whatever.
Wait,
I know who you're talking
Polish?
about.
Come on.
I am.
But yeah,
Polish.
like where like that one won, I think the National Book Award or something like that back in the '60s or something. It won something, but it was just so crazy hardcore. Like it reminded me of Altman's Tongue or something, where it was like really went for it.
Do you know Steve Erickson's work?
I do not. No.
That's very similar too.
Yeah.
It is Kaczynski.
Good job.
Yeah, I had it right. Just sounds stereotypical. Hello, fellow Poles.
Yeah.
We'll just insult you too. Steve Erickson has that thing too, where there's like a strangeness to it that like keeps building and keeps going off. And like it does sort of double down in that way. Although the doubling down, like I think both of them, or all 3 of them, like they don't go into the part where it's just absurd to be absurd, or just like or strange to be strange. Like they all have like a reason, and I feel like they have a reason behind it.
Because like even somebody like is it J.G. Ballard? Is that the correct?
Yeah.
In his like post-apocalyptic worlds, there's still some funniness to it. Like in the Drowned world, there's albino alligators or something like that, right? Like it's kind of funny and bizarre, but still terrifying.
Yeah.
or like with High Rise, where like they're eating dogs and killing each other, and it's like nuts, but there's some silliness to it.
Right.
So that's more on that playful scale, where like, no, I think with Volodine, he's with like Cormac McCarthy or Jerzy Kaczynski, or like where it's like, a very clean purity of the language,
Mm-hmm.
really simply told, but it's crazy arresting and disturbing because it's so the images are so concrete and clear. Yeah, exactly.
And that gets more impactful as this goes along. Like
Okay.
this is a very trigger warning sort of book.
Awesome.
FYI, everyone listening to this.
Trigger warning, everything.
Yeah.
All right, now
Just
we got that
boom.
out of the way.
Yeah. If you've ever had a bad experience in your life, you have been triggered. You were warned that this is going to come up. I want to read you this thing though. So from his introduction or his post-exotic novels, novellas, and novelist part 1, he has this section. Writing a novel, he goes through this whole explanation of how they're not really like using the word novel isn't really what's right, blah, blah, blah. Writing a novel then isn't the expression we should use to sum up the intention preceding a spokesperson's or a post-exotic author's work, because it's more for him composing a book that brings together several writing processes, quasi-novelistic, paranovelistic, poetic, sometimes theatrical, specifically post-exotic, with the goal of publicly producing a work that can be read like a novel, which is to say continuously, with a unifying thread, images, characters, and voices that structure and approach a story. Without theorizing here, the goal of every post-exotic author is certainly to give the public a way into, and certainly to stay within the novelistic domains barely or not yet explored by official literature. One concern of these authors is to diminish as much as possible the discomfort their readers might encounter as they enter unknown lands. And I wondered if you had a reaction to that, given that you've read some of this.
Failure. No. No, it does, because it is, it's probably going to be a topic you guys will bring up. There's a very meaningful catalog of plants and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
Like, so there's this juxtaposition of, say, like the world being irradiated and like people's just like eyelids falling off and like, eyelashes or whatever. Like, yeah, everyone's all this. Dead. But then there'll just be a catalog of smells and plants, and it's kind of like things just taking over. So I could see that, like, it gives you some of that comfortability to like keep you along and not, like have you check out.
And this is kind of like one of the core things with this is like this idea of the post-exotic, where they're not writing books the way that people would write novels. They're trying to do something different. And I'll give you his examples in a second. But he's created a bunch of words and terms for all this too, that are close to English terms, but aren't. That indicate different things. But it's always to work within the official literature of the area to upend it and to subvert what's there. And that's one of the main like revolutionary aspects of the book, and why like so many of like in these other stories or other places, they're always referencing like Writers goes through the Delkey book goes through a series of like bios of a number of the post-exotic writers and how they ended up dying and what their history was. And they're all like in trouble because they're revolutionary. If they do a post-exotic thing up, that's dangerous. Literature is dangerous within this world, which is interesting. And it's also a world, like you say, smells. His worlds are always seeping things. Like things are viscerally there. Like they smell, they're wet, they're damp. There's spiders that are like clearly spiders, like and large and scary. And like,
do you have a thing with spiders?
Don't like them. I'm not a fan generally of big spiders, and there are a lot in his books. So. And I think they're not.
Yeah, I was totally on board with Wild Wild West until the mechanical spider showed up. And I'm like, I can only suspend my disbelief for so long.
Yeah, no way. So this is what, like, here's the part where he talks about the form. So we know that the fragments we have at hand would fit best in the flow of what we might simply call a novel. The form is imposed on us as soon as we take into consideration the material we have at hand before starting the writing process, which is largely a process of assemblage. Lutz Bassman, in particular, is particularly at home in the structures that appear as incantexts. Manuel Draeger, in her novel 11 City Dreams, favored a pyramidal form in her story, with chapters mirroring each other on opposite sides of a central chapter, and that too is the case for Volodine's Minor Angels. And then in Grasses and Golems, she gave the public a similarly pyramidal work composed of 3 shagas, which are his like short story version of the short stories of Shaga. There's like the idea of like how these things are structured is really important and crucial to him. And I think that makes them really interesting too, as a person. Anyway, I'm going to put this thing online. There's one other part that I think is funny, where it's like, we know that our world it's like, and already we're hearing the sniggering from those who call themselves or believe they can call themselves psychiatrists. For them, doubt is no longer permissible. That's what they've been told. There's schizophrenia in the air. And at the very heart of our proclamation, schizophrenia. which is a fun part. So I'll put this online and have some other quotes from it for anyone who wants to read his whole thing. But it would be interesting to read it in kind of like in concert with the book, because it's giving like a different, larger framework to the world in which this world is a world.
It's interesting because I didn't think of this at all as being part of some sort of school or, you know, a subversion of anything.
You can only see it, I think, as you see the whole, as his whole, all of his books together start working in a way.
And maybe that could be the genius of it, that you can just take it as it is and it works totally fine, or you can integrate it into this weird mechanism of what they're doing with post-exotic, and it works that way as well. But just for like, if you want to cover read something, it's fabulous so far. So
it's great. And like they do say that too, of like that this is the book that's like Brian says something like this is the best place to start too, doesn't he?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It'd be very it's very approachable, which I appreciate.
And then I think
like
a lot
completely ignorant to all of this, so it's nice, easy entry.
So I think a lot of the other stuff will build up around it, especially as talk to other people who are really knowledgeable about all the other books, because some of the characters in here are character names that appear. Like Cronauer is one of his heteronyms to write, who's written a number of books, but isn't necessarily the same Cronauer that's in this novel. There's a lot of like games that go on with that. But for this novel itself, it does begin in like the simple way. Like there's been like a nuclear holocaust. There's like no one's alive. There's like people living in these small communes and or maybe in trains, and like they are doing their thing. I don't know how else would you pitch it? My pitch is that it's sort of like a post-apocalyptic Jessica Jones.
Okay, yeah, that works. Well, I'm only 70 pages in, so I'm not sure. I just know it's a post-apocalyptic survival story at this point. But it's like Dances with Wolves meets Planet of the Apes.
Perfect.
With a spider in it.
With a goddamn.
I have an idea for I'm trying to find it. Let's see, I have an idea for a intro music for this year. I'll email it to you once I find it. But there's a album from the like late 70s called Music for Plants, I think it is. And it's the guy made an album, and it wasn't designed for people. It was only for your plants to listen to it. And so with this book trying to kill every single person and let plants take over, I think the intro music should be that Music for Plants.
That's a good thought. I like that. Yeah.
I think we need to be like, yes. So if you hear some weird intro music, it's for the plants. It's not for you.
Yeah, you can't understand it.
But I love at the beginning of this where like, it's, when I saw like it was a nuclear wasteland, I was like, oh, okay, so like Russia has this second great Soviet Union, of course, like USA and Russia nuke each other or whatever. And it's like, no, it's just accidents.
Yeah, it's just like, yeah, exactly.
No, we just screwed up. We weren't trying to kill anything, actually.
It seems like so much more of like how everything will end.
Yes,
like just human error.
Have you not watched any of those like dash cams on YouTube of people driving in Russia? Like, yeah, the whole place is an accident waiting to happen.
I've watched like 30 minutes of those YouTube videos. They're like one of my favorite. Those, along with like baseball brawls, are my favorite go-to.
Like the wild west to me in modern times. It's just like people want to get drunk and do stuff. It's like, cool. Just film it. Just film it so you're covered in case somebody hits you.
It's like probably will.
Yeah.
Have you used that as any example of what life's like? They're like, people are at 100% chance of being in an accident in your life.
Yeah.
Getting crushed.
So, it made total sense that it's all accidental. I love that. I love that little detail at the beginning of like when all the accidents happen. Because of course there's going to be these crazy nuclear meltdown accidents because we're people.
And we're bad at a lot of stuff.
But maybe that's part of the subversion, because like you expect it to be it's post-apocalyptic is always like either the machines try to kill us or we kill each other, right?
Yeah,
And this was just like, oh yeah, we messed up.
Whoops.
Whoopsie.
Bound to happen.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to sort of track the subversive or how it upends different tropes along the way. I think it'll be fun. I think
it's a fun read. I hope folks buckle in and come along for the ride. This will be a good one.
Yeah,
and it's kind of perfect timing, given like what it feels like to be in America right now. It's just everything's sucking and being terrible, and it's very, very poignant and timely, I think.
And it feels like a wasteland, especially here where it's like we're supposed to get another 8 inches of snow and it's going to be negative 92 degrees.
Yeah.
That's why I got my Valencia mug today, is to like pretend that I'd be living in Spain where it's like not this, like
Yeah.
where it's actually, warm.
Yeah.
And not the government sort of works.
And that's the beauty of global warming, because maybe the world's going to hell, but at least it'll be hot.
Yeah.
Except for the winter when it's going to be frigidly cold because of this, but whatever. However climate works, it's all fake news. It's all fake news. It doesn't matter.
Nobody knows. Nobody's sure.
Science. I don't even believe. Whatever. The moon's hollow. The Earth is flat. Big deal. Yeah.
That was a great science moment last week where like was it the Chinese lab that they started growing plants on the moon and they died immediately. They're like, we did it, we grew something on the moon, and they're like, fuck it, damn it.
I think I texted you, it's like, oh well, good thing Mars is going to be much more hospitable. Because we're all moving there.
That's why Elon's shooting for Mars, skip the moon, can't grow plants. Oh man.
Or we could just stay here and take care of this one. This is a pretty good place to live. It's kind of nice.
Except
no, screw that. I want to go someplace where nothing grows. It's gonna be awesome.
Then we'll just ruin that by accident.
So no, I think the timeliness feels wonderful to be reading this. So.
Yeah, and it is
I can't wait for the crazy panic-inducing dreams to set in. Can't wait.
I don't even know that now. Given the state of the world, I think people are already having those panic-inducing dreams. So like maybe this won't have any effect. It'll calm everyone. There'll be something.
All right, how about that'll be the shtick for this season? We've done bingo, other stuff like that. This one will be a dream journal.
Oh,
we'll both keep a dream journal, and if something interesting happens that we can share, we'll share our dream journals.
Oh, absolutely! I'll always share my dreams.
All right,
but also we could have that as a contest. If you send us a crazy Volodine inspired dream that happened to you, we'll give you the other two.
Write it down. We'll read it on. We'll read it on air.
And the best one gets a copy of the other 2 books.
That, or we can try to make a T-shirt out of one of the dreams. That would be cool. Have Kaya design it. Have Kaya and Anthony design a T-shirt.
Yeah, we are
a weird dream.
T-shirts. That would be kind of perfect. We'll sell it through our TeePublic store or whatever. We do have that other T-shirt that I'll have to show you guys that we might be debuting. That's books and books and books and books and books. just all it says. Sort of like that style where they have like the names of people from like Han and Leia and Chewie and Luke, whatever. It's that, but just books.
So there'll be a T-shirt that just has a giant line drawing of a spider and an alien smoking a joint. And they're like, what is that? Oh, Radiant Terminus.
Yeah.
What? Yeah, it has nothing to do with that. That's just the T-shirt for it.
That's just what happens.
It's based off of one of our readers' dreams. Okay. Sounds good.
Oh my God.
It'd be the most random T-shirt.
I feel like we should each come up with new heteronyms for ourselves each week too.
Yes, of course, we'll do that as well.
Yeah, because the names that he uses are amazing. Like they're always amazing, like wild, like non-specific, but feel like maybe Eastern European, but not necessarily. Sort of names that are wonderful. Create it coming out like Maria Schrag. It's not really a name from anywhere, but it's a fun one.
Sounds like a tennis player that just barely cracked the top 100.
There you go. Maybe that would be that's a better game. We don't need to come up with heteronyms. I'll find one of the names of one of his post-exotic writers and tell it to you, and you have to come up with what that person probably does.
Okay.
Because you're good at that.
Sure. Sounds good.
It's a new way we'll make our guests come up with it.
Yeah.
That'll be the way to torture the guests. I hope Haley's not watching this. I hope she just comes on cold.
Yeah.
Man. Anyways, I don't have anything else to add to this week, or to this particular one, especially since we'll be talking in 2 more days about the first 77 pages, which is chapters 1, 2, and 3. I split it up. The chapters get shorter as this book goes along, which is interesting, and I think structurally and specific. But I did break it up so that every time we're just talking about chapters, we don't have any like end of stuff, which is why a few episodes that have like large chunks of the book, and then there's ones that are much more reasonably sized.
Great.
This one just ended up that way. But otherwise, you can always follow us at open_letter on Twitter, and Chad W. Post on Twitter, and Brian Wood __ on Twitter and on Instagram. And write to us if you have questions. Just do it personally or post comments and wherever you want, and we will read them and react to them and have fun with this season.
Go get the book. It's on sale. Go get it.
Yeah, you can get it. It's on super sale right now. Put in Volodine at checkout and you'll get 30% off of anything of his. So even if you buy the ebook through our website and use Volodine, you'll get 30% off.
Awesome.
So do that, everyone. But that expires on January 31st. So do it now. Then it'll go back down to a normal price. So good deal, man. Have fun in San Diego.
Will do. Have fun freezing.
I love it. Love it. Can't wait. Hey, take care, man. Talk to you soon.